All right. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well after the holiday weekend. It is Tuesday, I think. It's 10 o'clock Central, I think. And it's another episode of our weekly NOMBERG Law Live. Of course, I'm Bernard Nomberg in Birmingham. And I've got my colleague and new friend, Cooper Shattuck from the Tuscaloosa area as my guest. Good morning, Cooper. It's nice to
Good
see you.
morning.
And
How are you,
thank you for
Bernard?
making a little bit of time for us today.
Oh, absolutely excited to do it.
Well, we're going to get into an area of the law that is one of many areas that Cooper has experience in and enjoys talking about and helping out folks. We're going to talk about nonprofit organizations. And that may sound like a weird topic to talk about, but we all have heard that term many, many times over our years, but not many people really know the nuances about it. And we're going to get Cooper to educate us a little bit. So Cooper, before we jump into our topic, share a little bit about your practice and your firm and yourself.
Sure. So what I'm doing now anyway is practicing by myself, which is first for me in a 30-year career. I've been doing it for 5 years now. And after working for a couple of firms, working in state government and then for the University of Alabama, I was sort of ready to be my own boss. And that's got its pros and cons, but one of the pros is I'm able to do what I'd like to do to a certain extent. And so I've got a varied practice, which I like because I get bored easily. So having a lot of variety keeps my interest peaked, and it allows me to, focus on some unique areas from my experience in the past. The good thing is I don't get pigeonholed in any one thing, which happens at many firms. So nonprofits is something I've worked with nonprofits since almost the very beginning of my career, and I enjoy that work because you're helping someone or some group of people who are trying to help someone else, and that's really rewarding to do.
Oh, it certainly is, and some of the best people I know run some of the best nonprofit organizations around, and it really comes with it comes from a good place in the heart, because as you just said, it just in the description, nonprofit really just to me implies you're giving to the community, you're paying it forward, you're giving back, and there's a need for whatever that niche may be from that particular organization. But before we start talking about some of the nuances, from a bird's eye view, what does that term mean? What does nonprofit organization mean?
Yeah, so it means more and less than what people think from first blush. So a nonprofit is simply an organization. It can even be a group of people, an association, who forms their entity collectively with their goal being not to profit from their endeavors. Now, it doesn't mean the business of the nonprofit won't generate revenue. It just means that no individual shareholder, because there aren't shareholders, personally receives any benefit monetarily from their membership in that organization.
But from an organization standpoint, you can create a corporation of a business of some demeanor through whatever Alabama recognizes, whether it's LLCs or PCs, whatever it is, and you can have a board of directors and you can have employees that actually get paid. It doesn't mean that they're working for free. That right. Would be a volunteer.
That's right. Yeah, one of the big problems I think a lot of nonprofits face is they were created years and years and years ago. And as a result, the leadership has turned over multiple times, and people lose focus on what it is that they're doing from a business standpoint. And the fact that it's a nonprofit doesn't mean that you can just bleed money. Some nonprofits give money away. If that's their business purpose, that's great. But other nonprofits need to generate revenue in order to provide the services or charitable things that they do. And the big problem is people don't think of nonprofits from a business perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It's unless you're actively involved with a nonprofit, just the average person, I would think, just makes assumptions about what they are and what they're not. And that's why we're talking with Cooper
Yeah.
today. Cooper, one nonprofit that's very near and dear to my heart and my family is Heart Gallery, Alabama. And Heart Gallery, Alabama was founded about 16, 17 years ago with the purpose of educating the public about adoptions and the foster care system in Alabama. And they, through their efforts, they have helped literally hundreds, if not thousands, of children to be recognized and find their forever family. And that's its purpose. And I've watched this organization grow over the years from just one person to there's about a dozen. They have a large budget, they have a board, etc. And it's a nonprofit. It's not a for-profit organization. And to me, that's one example, at least in my world, of how beautifully these organizations can work. If you would, my question to you is give some examples in the Tuscaloosa or in Alabama that you're aware of that are considered nonprofits and give so much back to the community, whether it's money, time, or education, whatever it may be.
Oh yeah, a lot of charities, particularly charitable foundations, are nonprofits, right? Nick Saban and Miss Terry, they have their own foundation that they raise money for a lot of different great things that have been done here locally in our community. A lot of religious organizations have companion foundations that people contribute to. There are health clinics that are run by foundations that provide medical care for the medically underserved in the area. We have a federally qualified health center here, Watley Health Services, and there's a number of similar institutions all over the state. So it doesn't have to be an organization that just gives money away, but it can be an organization that provides services like those health clinics. They have a huge budget, and some money comes from federal granting sources and that sort of thing. But there are no shareholders, right? Now, the directors don't receive any money from participating as directors of that corporation. And I think that people often try to pigeonhole what a 501c3 is, which is something we can talk about in a minute. But the nonprofit world is very broad. And when we talk about internal revenue guidance and 501c3, that gets a little more narrow.
Well, it's you just brought up something I was going to get to, but while we're there, when people make their annual donations to either their favorite charities or charities that are being requested of them, we always ask, is it a 501c3? And that just seems to be the key term for if you want to receive a credit towards your taxes for this particular donation. So an organization can be a nonprofit, but may not have that tax qualifying status. So you really have to ask to make sure if that's your intent, if you want to get a credit. So not to get too confusing, but if I want to donate to a nonprofit organization, whether it's assets that I own, or I want to put it in my will, or I just want to write a check, what things, I guess, what this is such a broad question, Cooper. What things should I, as the donor, be asking of the nonprofit to make sure that my intentions are followed through by the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's tackle 501c3s first, because there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of confusion about that. And whenever you put numbers with concepts, people's minds sort of shut down. And it's not that confusing. It's simply this. Not all nonprofits are 501c3s.
Right.
But all 501c3s are nonprofits. Okay. So if you're a nonprofit entity, and you meet the requirements for being a 501c3 organization, then you can apply to be recognized by the Internal Revenue Service as a 501c3 organization. And 501c3 organizations are simply nonprofits which have a purpose recognized by the Internal Revenue Service. It can be charitable purpose, religious purpose, educational purpose. They're very specific guidelines,
Right.
but it's very broad. And you fill out a very lengthy application. Well, there's actually an easy application now, a short form that you can fill out, and you give the specifics of that organization, when it was formed, what its membership is, how much money it brings in, and if it's brand new, you estimate what it will be. And you send this form into the Internal Revenue Service, and a few months later, they say, yes, you are, or no, you're not a 501c3. If you are a 501c3, that simply means that anyone who makes a donation or contribution to that entity, who itemizes their deductions, can declare a deduction for the donation they give to that entity. And because the IRS has already recognized that entity as a charitable organization, then the donation is tax deductible. So you don't have to be a 501c3 for the donation to be deductible.
Right.
So any donation to a charity can be deductible, but if the donation is to a 501c3, the IRS says it's automatically deductible. Right.
And I assume that that's kind of, you really have to know the organization or the charity that you're donating to, and trust that they're going to do what your intended wishes are at the time. But I know you and I could take this, we could get really deep in the woods very quickly, but I don't want to lose our audience today.
It can get very complicated, as you can see, whether something is or isn't a charity in the view of the IRS. There's tons of cases on that. Whether something is or isn't recognized as a 501c3, the IRS can revoke 501c3 status if people, break the rules. The great thing, though, a big takeaway is, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't looked lately, but the IRS allows you to search to confirm whether an entity is recognized as a 501c3 or not. So if you're going to give, and Bernard, you probably going to give a big donation to somebody. If you're going to give that big donation and you want to make sure, by golly, I hope they're a 501c3, so I know that it's tax deductible. First thing you should do is ask them, are you a 501c3? And they can give you a copy of their tax ID number, and they can give you a copy of the letter that says they're a 501c3. Or you can just go to the website and check it out for yourself.
I was just getting ready to, you can go to, and I'm going to try to put links to that IRS, the part of the website. I'm also going to put all the contact information for Cooper for when you guys after the show can contact him if you have questions about this. Cooper, let's back up just a little bit. Let's talk about the formation of nonprofits. And I know that in and of itself can go in many directions, but if I'm an individual and I've got an idea that I really want to get out there and start to create a charity, a nonprofit of some sort, where do I even begin? Is it just calling you and that's how we start the process? What do I need to do?
Sure. I think the first thing to do is to figure out, get a good concept of what it is you want to do, because you're going to have to, and if you can say it in a sentence, all the better, because you're going to have to disclose that in a number of different places. So once you get sort of evolve or boil down that concept into something workable, then reach out to an attorney who's familiar with nonprofit work. And there's lots of great lawyers out there who can do it. And then you may want to form a corporation. You don't have to, but by forming a corporation, you get all the benefits that corporate entities enjoy, like limiting liability to its members, because it's a protected organization. And though members of boards of directors enjoy some immunity from liability because they're on a nonprofit board, it's always better to have belt and suspenders, isn't it?
Yeah.
A lawyer can help you decide whether you should or shouldn't create a corporation. And I've worked with people that have and haven't. It just depends on the situation. And then you decide whether you can qualify for 501c3 status, because if you can, you should. I mean, it's just a matter of filling out a form. And that's really how you get started. You'll need, if you form a corporation, you'll need a board of directors. It doesn't have to be a lot of people. It can be a small number. But there are no shareholders, as I said before. It's really just members or directors, or both. You can have members and directors.
Cooper, does it take a lot of time? Does it take a lot of money to form one of these organizations?
No, it's really pretty straightforward, and it's not super expensive. What drives up the cost is the complexity of the organizational documents. So if there's some limitation on membership, or there's some business that the nonprofit's going to be engaging in that might be considered unrelated to the nonprofit work that it's doing, things can get a little tricky, because you don't want to, if a nonprofit engages in a business that's not directly related to its mission, then that business is not a nonprofit, and that segment of its business can be taxed. So you've got to be very careful about the tax considerations. But I'd say first stop is a lawyer, and second stop is an accountant who's familiar with nonprofit work, because those two, the lawyer and the accountant, can work together to make sure that all the forms are completed correctly and all the revenue ultimately that's generated is reported correctly. And then there's an annual form you have to file with the IRS as a 501c3.
What about the name that I choose for my charity? How do I confirm if that name's already been used, or one similar to the language I want to use?
Yeah, so you can go to the Secretary of State's website, and under the tab, I don't remember exactly what it is. I think it's called business resources or online resources, something like that. You can do an entity search to see if there's a name out there that's very similar to what you want to use, because if you're going to form a corporation, you can't create a corporation with the same name as a corporation that already exists that's doing business, because there could be some confusion.
Sure. And my next topic, you've alluded to it a little bit. How do nonprofits, how do they get in trouble with either the IRS or with the Secretary of State, or even from a liability standpoint?
Yeah, there's lots of potential tripwires out there. One is, if the nonprofit engages in some kind of activity that would be considered a business activity that's unrelated to its mission. And I'm trying to think of a good example. Say you created a nonprofit to provide medical care to those who can't afford it, and then you also that nonprofit buys a movie theater. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with providing health care. And so the revenue from that movie theater wouldn't be tax exempt. So that, you see where the confusion gets. Yeah. So the whole reason you form a nonprofit is because the revenue generated is exempt from taxation. If you are a for-profit entity, the revenue generated is subject to tax. Yeah. So because the government allows you to do whatever business you're going to do exempt from tax, then they want to make sure that it's for a charitable purpose, which makes sense. The other way that 501c3s in particular get tripped up is engaging in political activity. One of the
in Alabama, really?
No. I know. Politics, problems. Politics in Alabama is right up there with football for entertainment and sports value. But anyway, 501c3s are prohibited from engaging in what the IRS calls electioneering, which is working for a particular candidate, raising money for a candidate, supporting a candidate, any kind of activity that furthers a particular candidate, big no-no for 501c3s. They can engage in some limited political activity that relates to legislation that may support their mission. So if your mission is working with children who need to be adopted or fostered or whatever, and you work on lobbying for legislation that protects those kids, that's okay, as long, but there's some limitations on it. You can get tripped up on that.
Sure.
And the danger with that is the IRS can revoke your nonprofit status and your 501c3 status, which could create a lot of problems. I think another way that 501c3s can get into trouble is, or nonprofits can get into trouble, either one, is by creating any kind of damage or harm, creating liability for themselves, just like anyone else or any business can. For example, say you've got a Christmas parade and a nonprofit has a float in the parade, and somebody gets, their foot run over by the float.
Right.
Well, gosh, the fact that you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you're not going to be liable for that. So the third stop after lawyer and accountant for setting up an organization is insurance agent.
Yeah.
Nonprofits need insurance just like anyone else does to protect them from that kind of liability. And a lot of people that are engaging in charitable work don't think about that. Hey, we're doing good. We're all volunteers. Yeah. It's great. And then somebody's in a car accident doing work for that nonprofit, and oh gosh, we don't have any insurance. And your own personal insurance may not cover you for doing work for that's a business entity or part of a charity. So
guys, we're talking with Cooper Shattuck in Tuscaloosa. He's educating us about how nonprofits, how 501c3s, how charitable organizations work. And Cooper, where I want to go next, and we're getting close to the end of our conversation, and I really appreciate all that you've shared with us thus far.
I've enjoyed it.
Tell us about Alabama nonprofits. How well are in the United States, is Alabama recognized for doing some good for our state and for our country, or are we kind of lagging behind in that area?
Yeah, I think we're probably doing as well as most are, but a lot of nonprofit work and nonprofit energies are related to the disposable income of the population. And unfortunately, in Alabama, we don't lead the state in disposable income for our population. So necessarily the contributions to nonprofit endeavors are not as much as in other states from a number standpoint. But we're also a state of big-hearted people. We like to give back to our community, whether it's through our churches or secular activities. And what we don't have in monetary gifts to give, people are certainly willing to give their time and effort. So we have a lot of volunteers out there that are helping their neighbor, and they may or may not be doing it through the guise of a nonprofit. And maybe they should, because there are certain things that, combining your efforts with others so that you can raise money to invest in those goods or services that you're providing could really be a way to leverage your volunteer time. So I think it's an area that certainly could grow without any real expense, and our efforts could be multiplied.
Well, it is an area of the law that seems in and of itself simple enough. Nonprofits, charities, we know those terms, but as you shared with us over the last almost 25 minutes or so, you really have to go and find those people who are experienced in how to set them up, how to protect them, and how to maintain them. It's not just pulling out paperwork off the internet or filling out a form you get out of a book. You know, what is the saying that I've heard? Don't let Google replace, be the replacement for my law license.
Oh, yeah. And the problem is, again, not that it's that complicated,
Yeah,
but if you don't know anything about it, I can lay tile, but it's not going to look as good as someone who does it all day, every day. Right.
that's right.
And
That's
so
right.
if you're dealing with particularly donations, and you're trying to help others, that's the whole point of the charity. Don't muck it up by trying to do it yourself. Right.
Yeah.
Get some help on the front end and make sure that all your efforts are protected.
I was going to say, what can start out as such a well-intended, good-hearted project or thought or want to give back into the community, do it the right way. Go see
Yeah.
Cooper, give him a call. And I'm going to put all of Cooper's contact information in the comment section. We're also going to put the link to the IRS website link where you can research about organizations. But Cooper, before we get finished, and I really do appreciate your time, how can folks get in touch with you? Is there a phone number or email, or what's the best way?
Yeah. So my website and email address are the same, coopershattuck.com. So you can reach me at coopershattuck.com, or just go to my website. There's a contact form there and my office number there. But shoot me an email, give me a call, and I'm happy to help.
Well, guys, this is why I do these conversations every week. It's interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise, and Cooper Shattuck certainly fits that bill. So Cooper, I want to thank you again for spending some time with us today on NOMBERG Law Live.
Sure, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And guys, we're going to keep doing these. We've got folks lined up in the upcoming weeks, as we do each Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. Hope you all continue to be well and do the right things and be safe for you and your families. And we'll catch you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thanks.